announced the Kia sustainability movement through a digital event on November 11, 2021, and declared its goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. Carbon neutrality is a huge challenge that is changing the industry and energy structure. It is a challenge that neither a single company nor a single country can overcome. Countries around the world are racing to declare carbon neutrality, and various legislation will affect Kia's future business environment. As you can see, the sales of internal combustion engine vehicle will be banned, and ambitious electrification targets are being made. In addition, financial investors are showing great interest in corporate responses to climate crisis. Now, investment institutions are considering not only financial factors, but also climate and environmental risks as important factors in their investment decisions. The market size of ESG-related funds continues to grow, and leading overseas sovereign wealth funds are also highly emphasizing the ESG investment principles. Moreover, customers' perceptions of eco-friendly consumption are changing very rapidly. So-called value consumption, which considers eco-friendly factors in consumption, is emerging as a new trend. Carbon neutrality is an unavoidable issue in automotive industry. Most of the major global OEM brands are announcing their goals of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 at the latest. Daimler has already declared that it will achieve carbon neutrality by 2039 and has announced that all models will be electric by 2030. GM and Volvo have set their carbon neutrality target by 2040. GM also changed its CI design in order to symbolize electric vehicles. Volvo has also set an aggressive goal for electrification. We can see that these companies are establishing its overall business strategy in connection with eco-friendliness and sustainability. Volkswagen and Toyota have set goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 in line with the national carbon neutrality strategies and put emphasis on supply chain management, waste circulation system, and energy transition. In order to achieve Kia's carbon neutrality goal, we first need to identify the amount of carbon emissions generated from Kia's entire business value chain. Kia emits 75 million tons of CO2 annually as a whole in 2019. The value chain is broadly divided into supply chain, production, product use, logistics, and disposal sectors. The supply chain sector emits 11.53 million tons, accounting for about 15.2% of the total emission. The second one is the production sector, which emits 1.25 million tons, accounting for about 1.7% of the total. Although the proportion of the production sector is very small, carbon emission from the production sector is so-called direct emission, and it is one of the sectors that we should consider most importantly to achieve carbon neutrality. The third is product use center. This is related to the exhaust gas that our customers emit while they drive Kia's vehicles. The amount of emission in the product use sector is 61.65 million tons, accounting for 81.7% of the total emissions. Next is the logistics sector. The calculation of the CO2 emissions from the logistics sector covers only inland logistics, and marine logistics are not included in Kia's carbon neutral category. The last one is waste and disposal sector. The amount of emission in this sector is relatively very small and can be further reduced by recycling. Kia established a carbon neutrality strategy for 2045. The overall direction of strategy is divided into three main categories. First, sustainable energy is about converting the traditional fossil fuel-based energy use into renewable energy-based one. Second, sustainable mobility is about transitioning from internal combustion engine-based vehicles into EV-based products and services. Lastly, sustainable planet is about achieving carbon neutrality by minimizing negative impacts on the global environment through recycling and offsetting. The first is product use. The product use accounts for about 82% of total CO2 emissions. Carbon neutrality in this sector can be achieved through rapid electrification. In the European market, the company will accomplish 100% electrification by 2035, and in major markets such as South Korea, the United States, and India, as well as Europe, 100% electrification by 2040. Ultimately, the company aims to achieve global electrification by 2045 to achieve zero CO2 emissions from product use. The second is production. It is possible to achieve carbon neutrality in production by converting the fossil fuel-based energy used in production plants into a renewable energy-based one. In overseas plants, we plan to achieve renewable energy 100% by 2030, and in domestic plants, we aim to achieve RE100 by 2040. In the mid to long term, hydrogen energy utilization can be considered as a viable option. The supply chain is also very important. In order to reduce 11.53 million tons of CO2 emitted from the supply chain, we need to establish emission monitoring system for primary parts suppliers and prepare various support programs to help our suppliers make their emission reduction roadmaps. In case of logistics, we must find ways to reduce emissions jointly with our logistics partners. In disposal, it is important to establish a recycling loop. Most of the ferrous and non-ferrous metals used in automobiles are currently being recycled, but as electrification rate progresses, the recycling of batteries and plastics will become an important issue in the near future. In case of offsetting, we will implement Blue Carbon project. We will revisit Blue Carbon in detail later. First, let me explain the supply chain. The supply chain emits 11.53 million tons of CO2, accounting for 15.2% of the total. In collaboration with Hyundai Motor Group and Kia, we plan to establish a supply chain management system for 378 primary parts suppliers and prepare a mid to long-term reduction roadmap. The production sector emits 1.25 million tons of CO2, accounting for 1.7% of the total. In order to achieve carbon neutrality in production, it is necessary to convert the energy sources used at Kia's production sites into renewable energy sources. First of all, energy efficiency improvement effort at existing facilities should be carried out as well. Increasing operating efficiency through facility improvement or developing various alternative processes can be considered. Next, in case of the proportion of renewable energy in the electricity uses at work sites, we aim to achieve 60% by 2030 and 100% by 2040. Regarding the use of LNG, we will consider using hydrogen energy in the mid to long-term perspective. Next is product use. As mentioned earlier, we aim to achieve 100% electrification in the European market by 2035, by 2040 in the 4 major markets, and by 2045 globally. In line with this strategy, a mid to long-term production plan will be established. In the graph, EV sales are shown in green, while FCEV and PBV volumes are excluded in this graph. Now, logistics and disposal. First of all, in case of logistics, it is important to convert finished vehicle logistics into eco-friendly vehicles. In case of disposal, we aim to build a recycling loop for plastics and waste batteries. We plan to increase the recycling rate of waste plastics to 20% by 2030 and also aim to increase the vehicle waste recycling rate from the current 85% to 95% in the future. In case of battery recycling, we need to establish a recycling loop for recycling waste batteries, such as recycling waste batteries into energy storage system or exporting minerals collected from disassembled battery wastes. While emission reduction measures are carried out in different sectors, it is expected that the sales volume will increase from 1.23 million to 4 million by 2030. Nevertheless, it is estimated that we can reduce CO2 emissions by about 7% compared to 2019 through the expansion of electrification and achievement of RE100 in overseas production sites. Assuming that the 4 million sales volume is maintained until 2040, CO2 emissions are expected to decrease by about 70% in 2040 compared to 2019. Finally, the achievement of carbon neutrality in 2045 will be completed with 100% electrification and carbon reduction activities in other sectors. Only remaining 3% of emission in logistics and disposal sectors will be absorbed through the offsetting program using Blue Carbon, which will be explained in the next slide. The offsetting program is expected to absorb approximately 2.22 million tons of CO2 per year. The most common activity for offsetting is to use green carbon, utilizing forest to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. But green carbon alone is not enough. we paid attention to the potential of tidal flats, that is, blue carbon, as a new carbon sink. Currently, we are preparing to start a restoration project for tidal flats in Korea with the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. Through a full-scale pilot project next year, we will embark a project that utilizes tidal flats as blue carbon. The tidal flats in Korea is expected to absorb about 260,000 tons of CO2 per year. This is equivalent to the amount of emission from 100,000 internal combustion engine vehicles. We will produce blue carbon through the domestic tidal flat restoration project and implement a project that contributes to carbon neutrality in the mid to long-term perspectives. We will also participate in a project called Ocean Cleanup. We aim to build a recycling loop by collecting marine debris and recycling it in various ways. Strictly speaking, Ocean Cleanup Project is not an offset program, but it is Kia's sincere effort for the global environmental protection. It is also necessary to have an organizational support to implement reduction activities. We have already organized and operated a company-wide Carbon Neutrality Council this year. The Council will carry out navigation, facilitation, and communication roles to achieve company-wide carbon neutrality. It especially focuses on internal and external communication to form a consensus on the carbon neutrality agenda. Since Kia has delivered a good reputation in external ESG evaluation last year, I think that internal and external communication related to carbon neutrality will help boost up Kia's sustainability brand image. The Carbon Neutrality Council is divided into 4 subdivisions: supply use, production, logistics disposal offset, and communication. The Council will examine a total of 17 key tasks. I want to remind you that sustainable management team alone cannot carry out all these tasks. Active participations and supports from various relevant departments throughout the company are highly required. The journey to carbon neutrality, which will be pursued over the next 25 years, will only be successful when there are sincere efforts and company-wide cooperations to achieve tangible results. The CEO has also emphasized the importance of social and environmental values such as sustainability, climate crisis, carbon neutrality, and ESG several times through various channels. We should work together so that Kia can successfully achieve these goals. Thank you.
Kia, movement that inspires.